Good afternoon, listeners and viewers. Welcome to another edition of this CitizenWolf audio podcast. This is episode 21 you're listening to. And yes, it has been a while since the last episode. I've been meaning to do another episode for quite a while, but due to things getting in the way and other commitments, and of course, like my guest I'm talking to right now, that's staying in the same situation, we haven't had a chance to actually get together and actually record this up until now. So I've been meaning to do this particular episode several months ago, but hey ho, it's we've actually got round to doing it in the end. So welcome to Jarvy Jared, another alumni of the EOJ YouTube series. I've had three people from the EOJ, should we say staff, shall we say, both past and present, and now Jarvy is now the fourth in the long line of people I've interviewed regarding EOJ and a bunch of other stuff in between as well. Would you like to? I'm not going to talk anymore. Would you like to introduce yourself? What was your previous role on EOJ? Please introduce yourself before I ramble on too long.
Sure. Well, obviously, I'm Jarvy Jared, and it's a real pleasure to be here on the podcast. It's been a little bit, but when I was on EOJ, I did a lot of stuff. Primarily, my positions were I was team leader of the writers for Case 3, and then also team leader of the musicians since Case 2. I also did some QA stuff and worked with some of the upper management to help develop the entire story of EOJ from Case 3 onwards. So there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, me in there. I also helped with, let me think, OST arrangement. I worked with James to, choose tracks while also composing on my own and, where to put them in on the scenes. I helped review the scenes and provide polished notes for the video editors so that they could do edits. Um, yeah, it's been a little while, but I know that I did a whole lot. It was one of the ongoing jokes that I started out with. We'll probably get into it as we do the interview, but I started out with doing very little, and then I ended up doing a whole lot more than I expected.
An awful lot, as we'll get into that. As I say, quite a big, integral part of the EOJ project throughout those most of the cases. So yeah, I've been meaning to get Jarvy on for absolutely ages, as I was saying, but I did plan this several months ago. Of course, I approached Jarvy on Blue Sky and asked him, "Do you want to go on the podcast?" And it just took a while for us to get together. So I'm really pleased to have you on the show and talk a little bit more about in detail about what you did and some of the more technical aspects of it and things like that. But so as I say, quite a lot to get through, and we'll try and get through as much as we possibly can. But as I say, I don't want to. As I say, like I do appreciate Jarvy taking out a lot of time out of your very busy schedule to talk to me and come to my humble podcast and talk about your experiences. So I'm really pleased to have you on the show. So let's just see what happens then, shall we? Hopefully, everybody will have a nice episode to listen to. You've spoken previously on like a previous podcast or other podcast, like the one of the EOJ podcasts. I think specifically you talked about your influences and other bits and pieces. You mentioned before that you are quite a fan of the golden age of detective fiction, like works of Raymond, Chandler, and similar works. When did you first get interested in that genre of fiction? Was that from a really young age, or was that from when you're at
Uh,
college, or?
oh damn, that's a good question. Starting off strong to hit my literary background, right? I mean, when I was a kid, it's really odd to say, I think middle school or so, I had this well, I had like the collection of either the classic Sherlock Holmes stories, so all the short stories and all the novels, and it was like a two-volume, pretty sizable collection. And that was when you're a kid reading, that kind of slightly archaic modern English. It was very hard to get through, but I do remember that I enjoyed it. I even read the Hound of Baskerville sometime in middle school. But honestly, if I had to be, a little specific here, I think I got really interested in mystery general fiction in college actually because there was a course literally called Detective and Mystery Fiction for one of my literature courses that I had to take for my major, and I signed up for it because I thought that this might be interesting, this might be cool. It also happened to be around the same time that I was working on EOJ early on, um, and that's when I was introduced to a lot of the I suppose a lot of the schools of detective and mystery fiction. I was introduced to obviously the Golden Age, but then also the Hardboiled, to modernism, postmodernism, and that's when I started like sort of exploring it just recreationally. And then after college, now I've caught up on my reading. I've read but I think I've read all of Raymond Chandler's novels. I haven't read Playback because I don't really know if I want to read something that wasn't fully his. But I've read that. I've read him. I've read some of Dashiell Hammett's. I'm working my way through Ross McDonald stuff. I've also read a couple other, other authors like Marjorie Allingham, who's one of the three queens of crime, in along with I forget the other lady, but also Agatha Christie. So yeah, I've just been. It seems like my interest has exploded since leaving college, um, almost naturally. I think that's just part of how it goes.
Right, gotcha. And as I say, it doesn't sit like you're probably quite a lot younger than me. You probably you maybe if hazard a guess early 20s maybe. So you're probably a good like 10, 15 years younger than me. It doesn't seem like your generation would be interested in that kind of going back to that age of fiction. But that's really interesting. That's really cool. Would you say like Raymond Chandler is your favourite author in that kind of genre of detective fiction? Would you say like he is your go to when it comes to that kind of work?
I mean, he's definitely up there, but I actually, because I've been reading a lot more of him, I like Ross MacDonald probably just a little bit more. One, he's written a lot more, and he came after Chandler. But two, I find there's this reviewer way back when, and when I say way back when, I mean like basically around the same time of like a contemporary of Chandler who was saying like the problem with Chandler, which isn't really a problem, but is kind of a feature of him, is his plots are very rambly, and you can read them without knowing what the heck happened, which is very, odd for a mystery novel or a mystery writer to sort of have that label put onto them. And I would agree because as much as I like his prose, his plots are a little weak and they don't get much better. They're good, but they're not solidified, which is an interesting sort of conundrum. But compared to him, I've been reading a lot more of Ross MacDonald, and I definitely think that he's probably my favorite of the classic hard-boiled writers. I don't know if anybody here has read Ross MacDonald.
Sorry to interrupt you. When you say hard boiled, like for people who might not know what that term means, what do you mean when you say hard boiled within the detective fiction? Is that like a subgenre or
It's a school, right? So when I say school, this is kind of pulling from my. So not to get too much detail, but when I was in college, I
discipline? Or say is it a discipline
discipline.
within that?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a discipline, it's a school. When I say school, it's kind of like a tradition, it's like a mode, a commonality, organized strata that we assign to certain groups of literary and non-literary fiction, and even just nonfiction too. Artistic movements like that. But hard-boiled fictions, just kind of give a short overview. It originated really in America, ironically or coincidentally, around the same time as the golden age of detective fiction in Europe and Great Britain. Um, there was this pushback in America that led to the creation and generally the affluence of this hardboiled genre. You can blame it on prohibition. You can blame it on the rise in organized crime, the Great Depression, World War I, World War II. It stretches from more or less 1918 to 1950s, relatively speaking, and it's still, something that's written about and written in today. Um, and it's a lot grittier than, say, the drawing room murders of Agatha Christie.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
mean this pejoratively, but the cutesy uh, puzzle mysteries that Europe was entertaining around the same time. Mostly because in America things got grittier, things got more violent. There was a lot more gray. It also coincided with the emergence of the noir genre of art, which I think people are familiar with in terms of film, but also art movements and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, it more or less was this idea of bringing cynicism and grit and dirty realism, even really dirty realism, back into the realm of realistic fiction. Um, it was super popular with pulp magazines, like The Black Mask. Um, yeah, I can't give like a full, complete overview because that would require a whole lot of historical context, but that's kind of like what hardboiled fiction, what I mean by it. It's this detective fiction that is very much psychological. It's a lot more neutral in moral lessons, if any moral lessons at all. It's a lot more violent, but also it's a lot more subdued in the
Right,
same
right.
way.
It is interesting, isn't it? Like I did do a bit of research, just like a bit of brushing up on like I did read a lot of this stuff like years and years ago, back when I was in college and university and stuff like that. But it is interesting, like when you compare the earlier detective fiction, like from the early 20th century, like you got like the hard-boiled stuff of like Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe and all that, all the rest of it, and then it leads way into like the works of like Agatha Christie and so on, where you got like these, I guess, enthusiastic amateurs rather than like hard-boiled detectives, and then like it's sort of like it trails off from there. I suppose it is interesting how like comparing like how the medium changed over time and stuff like that. It is quite interesting, but like it's comparing it to lot the older like American detective fiction of the early 20th century is quite intense. You got these intense characters. They want to solve the case, and like they're under these like really oppressive, corrupt regimes and stuff. They've got to try and they're working against the clock and stuff. And then like it's sort of as the years go by, you're starting getting like all these like these characters where like they're not detectives by trade, but they're sort of like, as I say, enthusiastic amateurs. Where you got like,
Yeah, they're pulling from the traditions of Doyle and Poe. Interesting fact about, if we talk about the comparative history of these two, modes of detective fiction, Chandler, Raymond Chandler, he had a lot more success in England than he did in America when he was writing. That's probably why you ended up reading him in school, because he actually was a lot more affluent, a lot more famous, even influential on the genre and recognized in the UK than he was in America when he was, considered just another violent hack of the pulp novels
did he
and
have
pulp
British
magazines.
citizenship? I can't
He
remember.
did.
It's a bit hazy. I think he did. So that's probably
He had
why.
dual
Like he,
citizenship. Yep. He grew up in England. He came to America. He was a bit of an Anglophile, I think is the accurate term here. Um,
yeah.
yeah, he grew up in in the UK and was, I think, educated before he came to America. And more or less he was a bit of an outsider and came to like that sort of American detective fiction of the grittier pulp novels, because he had a very educated background, like a very classic. Um, he studied like Arthurian stuff, right? He was a big fan of the romances of that kind of classic sense. Which if you read some of his books, it kind of makes its way very naturally into his fiction, which is odd because you would think with hard-boiled grittiness, you'd have a lot more violent, coarse, very ugly sort of language, very sloppy topics and themes. And yes, there is a lot of violence that he obviously put in because that was the genre that he was working in, but you also see these elements of romanticism, chivalry, Arthurian chivalry, knighthood, things that you would only get if you were classically trained and classically studied, that kind of literature in, ironically, England, the UK, Cambridge, that kind of stuff.
It's The Big Sleep is his most famous work, isn't it? I think that was his debut novel, and that was the one that like he's still famous for. And of course, like that was the one that was famously made into a film, played by Humphrey Bogart. And interestingly, he also played.
Sam Spade. He played Sam Spade in Maltese Falcon.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So he played both characters. He was the go-to guy to play your detective, Humphrey Bogart. He was the guy to go for. So he played the lead role in both of those films, of course. So, and I'm more being the British as I am, of course. Like it curse as it is, I'm more probably maybe not familiar more with like the written stuff of the early 20th century. I'm more probably familiar more with the later 20th century stuff that I was shown on stuff like on TV, like ITV and things like that. You got like, well, of course you got Agatha Christie, a lot of all of us like Miss Marple and the rest of it, and you got Rosemary in Time and a lot of all the those kind of things that like and A Touch of Frost and the rest of it. But it is quite a stark contrast between those two things, like how it sort of like progressed from there. But you can go, it's a massive genre to delve into, but like how far would you say that all of that the detective fiction has influenced your approach to writing? How far would you say it's influenced you as a writer?
You mean like in general or like for EOJ?
Just in general, go with general first of all. Then we can go into age afterwards if you like. But I'd say I was thinking more in general. I'd say.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. It really has influenced me terribly. So, I do writing. I've done writing outside of EOJ, and I'm writing other stuff at the same time. But I, the thing about mystery is it is old in terms of a genre. Like it goes way, way, way back. I mean, Oedipus Rex it could be classified as a sort of mystery. Trying to figure out like what the heck happened. If we've read the classic play Oedipus Rex, we're trying to figure out like why are all these bad things happening. It's a weird sort of investigative play, as it were. So it's a very old genre. But I think my exposure to mystery and hardboiled fiction in general, it's made me think that you could classify a lot of writing as mysteries, or stories can benefit from having a mystery. You don't really need to throw it in all the time, but the idea of investigation, some question at the center of everything. Um, I think that's made it easier for me to conceptualize stories because mystery is a very good sort of plot hook. The why, the how, the when, the who, the what. I almost forgot my fifth interrogative. That would be embarrassing. That definitely has sort of made it so that I can conceptualize stories in a little more specific way, I guess. Rather than like a vibing out like, oh, I feel like this would be cool, or anything less structured than that. But other than that, I don't know if it really has influenced me any more than any other genre. I mean, maybe stylistically, for sure, because a lot of hardboiled fiction is very sparse. It's very not like heavy prose, but it is pretty heavy, heavy prose. It was all influenced by Hemingway, who, as much as I have certain gripes with Hemingway, I gotta admit, dude's got a good style. It's very easy to imitate. It's very easy to be a bad imitator, and sometimes, people did struggle with that. But, that kind of very macho, but also very specific prose, that's definitely influenced my sense of style of it. It's gotten me a lot better at being very selective and not wasteful with words, making sure that they go, to quote him, in the right order. It's made my writing tighter, I think.
Would you say it's the biggest influence to you, or do you take a whole bunch of influences from a whole bunch of places when you're actually writing something, or you take a lot from everywhere?
I take a whole lot. I take from, yeah, I take a lot from everything. There's this one critic who I really like. I don't even know. I think he's based in, or was based in, the UK. He goes by James Wood. And he put it nicely where he said writers ought to basically pick from everything that they can get, regardless of genre, regardless of, what their focus is. And, I agree, because you don't want to be a one-track writer where you only write one thing and you only can say one thing. You can't do that if you want to do anything with this particular art form. Mystery definitely has influenced me, but it's not the biggest influencer. I actually have three influences I can cite very clearly as to which ones and why they remain like the big three for how my style and sense of writing has evolved. And they're ironically not actually all mysteries. Well, maybe one's a mystery, but I would call it like a soft mystery in terms of influence. I can tell you though. Yeah. I can tell you the three novels and the three authors that I think have influenced me the most, even though they don't have anything to do with hardboiled fiction. Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
The first is Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. That stylistically has been probably my biggest influence. I don't know if you've ever read it. It is a gorgeous book. It is an intense
I've heard of
book.
it, but I've never read it. I've never read it myself.
There's apparently a good show, I think on Netflix or somewhere, that's doing an adaptation of it. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's any good, but it's a very good book. It has some of the most gorgeous prose you could ever read, and it's interesting because he was a Latin American writer. He was from it's not Latin American. He was South American. He wrote Colombia. He was from Colombia, so he wrote it in Spanish, translated by a guy named, I think, Gregor Rabasin. Um, and the funny thing about that is, normally in translation, there's always like an awkward sort of gap between like the original and the translated text. But apparently, according to Marquez, the translated version is better than the Spanish version, or at least as close to the sound of the Spanish version as much as possible. So that one has
Right.
definitely influenced my sense of style. I can't really go into length without pulling out the book itself, but just trust me, my sense of style comes from Marquez. He's a very good writer. The second author slash book that's influenced me is Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, which is it is the I'm gonna put on my literary hat here and throw my hat in the ring and probably get shot for it. But I consider Anna Karenina the closest book to a perfect novel ever, even if it's not like fully perfect. And that's a very big, bar to set in literary circles. But I don't know if you've read it. I doubt many people have because it's very long. It's very accessible though it's very long. Um, that is probably the closest thing that I could
You'd say
say.
you'd say it's a guilty pleasure of yours, that particular one.
I'm not
You'd
even sure
say.
if it's guilty, man, because it's just you only read. I've read it once. I don't want to read it again because I'm like I don't want the magic to be ruined. If I ever read it again, I'm like, oh, I can see all its flaws. It's just it is good. It is a very good book. It's got everything in it. It's got romance, drama, an element of mystery in a way, psychology, history, politics, philosophy. I mean, if you wanted a book that could encapsulate the entire human race, Anna Karenina for me is the top pick. 100 Years of Solitude is actually a close contender to that, but Anna Karenina, perfect book, or as near perfect as you can get. Um, Go read it, people. You won't regret it. Trust me. It's either that or War and Peace, but I would say read Anna Karenina first. It's a lot easier than War and Peace. And then my third book that's influenced me, my third author, Harper Lee and To Kill a Mockingbird. If you've kept up with EOJ, you might not be too surprised by one character specifically. Why I say that, but all I'm gonna say about it in regards to the book is it's my favorite book. It's not the perfect book, but it's my favorite book. That's probably why it's influenced me the most.
Isn't that the one? I could be remembering it wrong. Isn't that the one where is it To Kill a Mockingbird? Is that the one where like that guy the guy like read that book and then decided to kill John Lennon? Was that? Am I
No,
thinking of a
that
different
was
book?
that's oh my god, what the Salinger? It's J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye.
That's the one. Yes, I am getting confused. Thank you. When you said it, like that it is Catch on the Rye. Yes, sorry, I was getting those two things confused. But yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what to say that I haven't already ranted to a bunch of friends about, but I love To Kill a Mockingbird. It is a good, cozy, warm feeling book that doesn't feel pretentious. It doesn't feel heavy-handed. It's super simple, and yet it's sort of this demonstration, I think, that even in a very simplistic story, you can have a very complicated story. And that's sort of my philosophy going into honestly, when I started taking up the task of designing, the entire story of EOJ and Case 3, that was sort of my philosophy going in. That like we probably get into this as we talk about on the podcast, but the last two cases I did not like. They were superficially complicated for a bunch of reasons, and I hate it. I did not like it.
Okay, that's
Right? I
interesting. That's interesting.
it's,
Okay. To hear it directly from you. Okay, okay. We'll get into that a little bit later, but yes.
so I wanted to do the opposite of that. I wanted to tell a story that, at its core, was simple, and yet from which can develop these very complicated, very nuanced, thoughtful ideas and themes, um, from which the entire story of EOJ can sprout. Um, what it comes down to in To Kill a Mockingbird really is it's a story about a father and a daughter. So that's pretty simple, and yet that's so profound, that's so universal, right? And from that, we have this 300-page novel about um, racial inequality, the rights of the individual, childhood, a bunch of other, growing up, loss of innocence. Um, these are very complicated themes, and yet they emerge from really this core value of father. This is a father-daughter story. Um, that's what I wanted to do. It was part of my premise to figure out, like, okay, we have to work on this case and then use this case to springboard off of and use to, tell the rest of EOJ. How can we do that? And that was part of the initial planning stages. But yeah, just cycling back to your initial question, what influenced me the most? Not mystery fiction, surprisingly, but those three. Those three are the ones that have influenced my sense of mystery fiction, despite them not being strictly mysteries.
Ah, gotcha. That's interesting to hear. It's not always straight cut, then, isn't it? I suppose. But I was thinking maybe it would be Raymond Chandler all the way. But no, that's interesting. That is. I've never
It's a
guessed
bit
that.
of an oddity for sure. It's definitely people would not expect it, especially like I think people like case three so far. But they probably wouldn't say like, oh yeah, that's where he's pulling from Marquez or that's where they're pulling from Tolstoy or Harper Lee. I don't know how to explain it other than, authors have their own fascinations and their own influences and they're drawn naturally to those that they like and ironically sometimes those that they don't like. And that sometimes just emerges in the writing that they do make and some of it is predictable. You can't draw a line between Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, but you could also draw a line between Chandler and the Arthurian legends. But you wouldn't know that unless you really, well, if you interviewed him or if
Dive
you,
into it.
dive into it. Yeah.
So, what would you say is the most? So, you as a writer, of course, like, what would you say is the most difficult or challenging aspect when it comes to composing a piece of writing? Is it like thinking of a particular idea, or is it more difficult to actually put the pen to paper and actually put it together? What is the most difficult aspect for you
Oh,
personally?
I'm gonna give you an answer you're not gonna like. Just putting the words together in the right way.
Just put them in the
which
right
is
order.
just putting them
Just
in
the
the right
order.
order. Like that's I know there's some cute answers of like, oh yeah, developing plots can be difficult or getting characters right can be difficult. For me, it's not. Those are not the hard things. Those are the things that spring out of the hard thing, which is how do I word? You know, there's this great quote by I forget who, which is so funny, but it more or less goes, I hate writing. I love having written, which is such a nice encapsulating feeling of how frustrating it is in this sort of art form where you only have one tool set and those are words. And man, do they suck every time you open a blank page and it's like the worst thing ever, but you gotta use them. There's no cheats, there's no shortcuts. That for me has always been the hardest part. It's also the most enjoyable part, especially when you get a nice string of dialogue or a nice just bub speech from a character or a set of characters. Um, but that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of effort to just get it to sound the way it needs to sound. Especially in a script format where it's all dialogue, so it's all very much focused on the audio, not the narration. Getting that right has always been difficult. It's the most challenging part and yet the most necessary part, I think, of the writing. And it's something that a lot of amateur writers, I think, don't really think about too much. They're worried about plot and character, and that's fine. That's totally part of it. But all of that springs from the tool set, which is just words. I think that if you're going to write very well or want to write very well, you're going to have to figure out how to do words very well. And that's not something people like to like admit because people think this is easy. This is not easy, man. If this was easy, I would not be complaining about it most of the time. But words are hard. They're really good, but they're also really hard.
Words are hard.
I think you had James on here, right? A couple podcast episodes ago. I think he would agree
Yes,
that
the legendary
words are hard,
James
man.
Boot, as I say, he was fantastic. He was again, but
He would probably agree that words are pretty hard sometimes. It's kind of like, oh God, I gotta write another scene. Oh man.
I guess is it part of the issue with that is maybe the fear of like looking at a blank page? Is that part of the issue? Like I've got to fill this giant white void and then put words on it. Is that part of the problem? More so the actual
Sometimes,
technicalities of it, maybe.
sometimes, because a blank page is pretty intimidating for anyone. I don't think there's a writer in this business who likes a blank. I mean, you could like a blank page because of the possibilities it promises, but you also might be frustrated because it's a blank page. I gotta fill it somehow. Oh God. Um, Sometimes there is that fear. I don't know if I have that fear strictly speaking, mostly because I've heard that excuse to explain away the myth of writer's block. I don't think that's really a real thing. I think it's just fear. Blank page or the fear of not, getting the words right. Um, there's nothing more complicated. There's nothing really complicated about it. It's just the fear of messing up. And the blank page just happens to be the most visible object in front of you at the time. which manifests that particular fear.
That's interesting. I'd have thought something would be something a lot more technical than that, but like, I think you're worried more about the basic fundamentals. Even though I don't think you really have a problem with them. It's just a case of I don't frightened of how to put them in the right order, but making sure.
I think that's because, and I've admitted this before in other calls with other people. I'm not one. I before working on this production, I never wrote a script. I was actually more of a a prose writer. I wrote short stories. I tried my hand at some novel length stuff. We're not going to talk about those attempts. But I've also straight up admitted that like I don't really know if I'm a prose writer. I think I'm a poet masquerading as a prose writer, which is why I have such a focus on the language, on the words. Because that's what poetry is. Poetry is the application of words in a certain artistic, humanistic way. It's a way to make you recognize language as an art form, but also recognize how it's manipulative, but also how it's effective, and that sort of thing. That's probably why like I don't stress too much about like does the plot make sense? Is it clean? I don't stress about like are my characters realistic or OP because for me that's easy stuff. That's stuff that'll emerge very naturally if you even have like a sense of what you're doing, and most people I think do. You just don't have to think about it too hard. But language is where it all begins, baby. And I am a very strict language enthusiast, I guess. I've gotten flack on it too on the team where I'm like, this doesn't sound right, and they're like, what do you mean it doesn't sound right? It seems fine. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You gotta look at look at the participles, look at the antecedent and all that. This doesn't make any sense. You're dropping your pronouns. You're making a confused metaphor. You're mixing metaphors. What are you doing? And people don't always understand, but I usually get my way. Usually, sometimes I'm a little. I will completely admit
Usually,
I'm a little
sometimes,
Lucas here.
mostly, sometimes maybe.
Sometimes you gotta just let your hair down and realize that look, it's not gonna be perfect. That's fine. But my goal has been on the production to try to get it as good as it can be, and that really comes down to getting the language right.
So you're more concerned as a writer as in like how the words flow together, how I guess the rhythm of it, I suppose, if everything flows properly throughout, and
Oh yeah.
if the dialogue speaks to you, I suppose, if that's the correct way of putting it, instead of rather
Oh yeah.
the I guess like the mechanics of it of the whole scene. I suppose you're more interested in the floweriness of it, I suppose. I think, but yeah. So you really like the language aspect of it, focusing on that.
I mean, this actually comes down to kind of circling back to your other question about Raymond Chandler. He's the one who probably influenced me the most in that direction because he has said he thinks that style outlasts plot. I think he's right. Because you can have, there's only so many ways that you can write a plot. There's not an infinite amount of stories out there. Murder is murder, mysteries are mysteries. Generally speaking, you have the same path in between a lot of stories. But style is what distinguishes, right? And that's something that I was also very interested in trying to see if we can do to make Case 3 and onward stand out to other audio dramas, even stand out against, our predecessor Turnabout Storm. What's the style that we can go for in terms of just how is this being written? Um, but yeah, I definitely would agree that I'm definitely more focused on the language in that way, which I think makes it a little different from other audio dramas. I don't know if you've ever watched any other audio dramas. I have. Some are okay. Some don't care about the language. Some are very much attempts. I think I don't want
Attempts.
to get too mean about it, but it's
Something
I,
happened. Attempt.
something happened. Plots do occur, but the language, there are not a lot of audio dramas, at least in the MLP community, that seem to care about that. And, that's fine. It's just a method. I'm not saying like this has to be like how everyone does it. This just happens to be how I conceive of it. But that does mean like the challenge is how do I make this stand out? We already stand out with the visual aspect on all the, editing, all the sound effects and music and yada yada yada, so on and so forth. But it all comes from the writing. All of it comes from the writing. So how do I make the writing stand out was the question that was posed to me um, when I took up the team leader position for the writers, and that sort of question made its way into the writing itself. I would argue that our writing in Case 3 overall beats Case 2, Case 1, and Turnabout Storm on a technical level. That's a very bold claim, I know, but there's stuff in there that I think will last longer than EOJ. There are just lines and dialogues and speeches that will stand the test of time just because they're so solid, they're so realized, and that's because we actually put the work in to make sure that these are the things that can be felt, not just a passive audio drama production, but an active one that gets you to listen.
Well, it is quite a bold claim, as I say, like when you compare into the
Well, you gotta have a little
original,
arrogance in the business, I think. You gotta have a little bit of
spoken like a true writer. you really are a writer.
You gotta have a little got a little gumption. I don't like Harold Bloom, but he had some points when he said, every writer has the anxiety of influence, trying to break free of the previous mold. I think that's true. I think, just we'll probably talk more about it again the EOJ talks, but that was something that I was concerned with. Like, how do we make this not just the sequel to Turnabout Storm, another crossover series? How do we make this bigger and stronger? And all the other aspects of production went into doing that. But my goal was as a writer to figure out how to do that on the writing side. It's a little elitist. However, I have proof on my hand because look at Case 3, guys. It's pretty good, guys. It's pretty. You should watch this.
But I suppose, like, again, as a writer, like I am a writer myself, of course, but I haven't really written anything like in this sort of scale. But like I've written like smaller projects and things like that and stuff. But I suppose like you have to, as a writer, I suppose you have to have a kind of a sort of a level of belief or arrogance in your own work to believe this is good, this works, this is compelling, this is great to listen to, it works. There are problems with it maybe, but like it's really solid. You got to have a strong belief in that.
For sure. I mean, if you don't, you're never gonna beat the inherent imposter syndrome that all of us face. You gotta believe in yourself, even if it means kind of being a little arrogant. It's a weird paradox, but it's very necessary.
Step 1, be arrogant. Step 2, profit. Is that the
Step 1, be arrogant. Step 2, glass. You're living in a glass house. Your hammer's gonna come down. Realize your arrogance is not worth anything, but have some confidence that you kind of know what you're doing, or at least try to figure out how you know what you're doing. Step 1 is arrogance. Everyone's got to be arrogant enough to try. Step 2, if you make it that far, is realizing you don't know what you're doing, but you made it as far as you might as well try to figure out what you're doing. And then step 3 is probably profit.
Of course, we'll get into a little bit more, a little bit later on, of course, of stuff, because there's a lot to delve into that, especially with Case 2 and Case 3. I do have quite a bit of bits and pieces to say about that, but because of how big a role that you had on EOJ, it's really difficult for me because there's so much stuff to cram into such a small amount of time. Because you were not just the one of the head writers, the head writer. You were also the head composer of the musicians, which is pretty crazy. So tell us more a bit about that. Like, you also composed a lot of the stuff for the EOJ project as well. How did you get into that?
Necessity. That's So I started obviously back in Case 2, and the only reason I started was because we were like, I think we need some more music because we're running out of stuff from the Ace Attorney series. And I said, well, I played the piano when I was a kid. I guess I could figure out how to use a digital audio workstation if I had to. So I started playing around with a free program called LMMS, and it was really bad what I came up with, but people seemed to like it. People were like, okay, maybe we can set you up with something, get you started there. And so I just started basically playing around, and that's when we started composing custom music for the series. And that was back when we had JTH and myself mostly. It was rough in the beginning. I I think I've said this before, I don't know on here, but on other stuff. I don't like my early stuff. I think that's normal though. But I really don't like some of the early tracks I made, especially given just, how much more experience I've gotten since then. But yeah, I started with Case 2. I started composing, just very basic looping tracks. Probably a bad decision to start with orchestral arrangements, but it was what I had on hand. Orchestral arrangements are very...
Bit ambitious, quite ambitious to start off with orchestral stuff.
Yeah, but it was what I had on hand, so I figured, okay, I figured I'll start with this. And that's very, that's a learning curve because then you got to figure out arranging and panning and mixing and mastering and all the stuff for each individual instrument. And bear in mind, I'd never done this before, so it was a very big learning curve for me. And then I ended up being the team leader of the musicians, so I don't know how that happened.
I think there's a lot of bit of missed stuff in between that happened there, like it's just blurred.
Probably.
So when did you actually start composing your own music? Was that around the same time that you were started making your own writing, or was it earlier than that, or was it after that, or what sort of time frame we're talking when you started composing your own music?
Way after. Uh, I only started composing like personal music when I started making music for EOJ, and I was composing music on the side just as like I want to practice essentially. Um, and it was kind of just a shot in the dark. We're trying to figure out like how do I, if I don't want to make a video game sounding song, how do I make it? Just kind of playing around, making some incomplete songs here and there. But eventually, it's gotten to the point where I can compose relatively okay-ish. I composed some stuff for the D&D game that I'm a part of. I've done some character themes there.
Oh,
Um,
that's so cool. That is for your own D&D. That's
yeah,
dope. That
some
is.
video games, some battle themes, some stuff like that. Very recently, shameless self plug. I have a YouTube channel now, but I'm using it mostly just to archive and put up music that I've made over the years. But I started making original, well, not just original. I've made some covers of some pony songs. Um, and also, I guess I'll just throw this in here. I started making stuff for Ponies at Dawn. I submitted my first piece to them very recently. Um, Sadly enough, I didn't quite get in because there were so many other people. But that's okay because it's Ponies at Dawn. That's a pretty big deal to even get any recognition and get any like feedback or just be surrounded by a very talented community of musicians. Um, but more or less, that's basically like I guess I've started making original stuff now too. Very slowly though, because I'm busy with everything else. But yeah. So yeah, just to answer your question, I only started making original music after I started making EOJ music because I had the time, I guess, the wherewithal. Music is weird.
And it spurred you on, I suppose. Like once you've done that, as you've finished working on EOJ now, like it's given you the motivation to work on your own stuff as well. I'm pretty sure it would be.
Oh yeah, overall, just across a bunch of disciplines. Yeah, I've having now stepped down, stepped away from EOJ. I do have a lot more free time, which means that there's a lot more time to do what I want to do, more personal stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I I'll give you a statistic of I don't know. I'm pretty sure this is accurate. I'm pretty sure I double checked it when I wrote this script a couple of months ago. Based on just on the soundtrack of Case 2 of EOJ, you were credited on 67% of the tracks, which is pretty crazy. So 19 of them were credited to yourself. Between Case 2 and Bonds of Justice, so you were quite a big quite a big gear in the, if you want to go with that metaphor, gear or cog in the machine of EOJ in terms of composing music, and that's not even talking about the writing. That's just the compositions. So what would you as a side question? What would you say is your worst and what's your least favorite? Not worst. What would you say is your least favorite track you composed and why?
Turning Pages theme.
Is it simply because it's one of the older ones?
Yeah, Turning Page is probably the roughest one, honestly. Which is funny because Optic said, Optic Rainfall, our voice actor for Turning, he said he liked it. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I could have done a better job if I was older, wiser, and more experienced, but I wasn't when I made it. I think I just like it because it was my first theme. It's not awful. It has a certain kind of logic to it, but it's very much baby's first song. Um, Very rough. I guess the natural question is what's my favorite of Case 2 or of all plus unreleased tracks?
Oof. You widen out the question. Start with Case 2 for now. Just set it to Case 2 for now, and then we'll talk about the unreleased stuff
Oh
afterwards.
God. It's been so long since I thought about the Case 2 OST. Nuts. Probably a toss up in Case 2 between Confess the Truth or the resolve of Athena Sykes. Which were like the last couple of songs we made for that case. If I want to include Bonds of Justice Season 1 in there, Skulu's Heart is pretty much top for me. It's very cute, very, very pretty. Case 3 so far. What episode are we on? What's been released? Up to 3.5, right?
Yeah, 3.5 thus far. Yeah.
Then Sonata's objection theme was pretty good. Seeking the Truth, I believe it's what it's called. I can't remember. It's been so long. That one was probably my favorite so far. There's a lot more to come. No spoilers, but also somewhat spoilers. I think I composed, because the other thing, while we're on the topic, the OST for Case 3 is done. Like, I completed it before I stepped down from EOJ. Me and Zecora were months ahead of everyone else in terms of just, like, that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that. Like, you were way ahead of everybody else, pretty
Well,
much.
we worked our butts off for that, but of the Case 2 OST was like 20-something tracks. Case 3, 30-something tracks. I composed a good 20-something of them, I think. And my favorites have not been shown yet. So,
Ooh,
yeah,
that's interesting.
I can't give you more because I'm pretty sure that's a spoiler. But of the release tracks so far, Sonata's pretty good. The objection theme is pretty good.
Pretty good. Pretty good in your eyes. Pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
What would I really from case 2. Well, I'm just sticking to case 2. I really Trick Reasoning is the track. Probably one of my favorite tracks. It's like a really nice, simple. I really. It's probably one of the early ones. I think. I don't know how you feel about it, but I really enjoy that one. It's a nice, quiet, subdued track.
It's James's favorite, I think, which is really humbling to think, because he's been my go-to for like all things Ace Attorney story and music-wise. So to hear him say like, "Oh, this is on the level of the main composers for the series," has been a very
That's
gratifying.
quite a lot of praise coming from him because he
Yeah.
is the authority on all things Phoenix. Right, James is crazy. You can ask him. When did that bit of dialogue appear? Oh, that was in like that was in the third game on like the second paragraph.
Exactly.
He's crazy when it comes to that stuff.
Trick Reasoning was early for sure. Fourth, fifth track I made, I think. Let me think. It was, oh man, what was it? It was Turning Page, Private Eye, then the leap from those two to Luna's introduction theme, and then yeah, I think Trick Reasoning was the fourth piece I actually made overall. I think it's pretty good too. It's simple, but it works. It's effective simplicity.
I'm just scrolling through. Oh, and that you also that like Clockwork as well. That's got like a history with it as well.
No.
I knew that was going to happen.
No, I can't escape it.
What's you find it cringy or like it's got a history? I can tell. Would you care to tell it?
I've had to make that stupid motif so many times between so many songs, and then also revising and building upon my experience with it. It was an in joke in the team that I hate clog boxes because sorry, I can't curse in this talk. Bleep that out. Bleep that out.
No, curse away if you want. I'm not.
Oh man, Like Clockwork was a bastard, I guess, to compose. It wasn't even difficult. It was just annoying to just over and over tick tock, and then when we started making music for Case 3, and Sonata was gonna be a protagonist. I was like, oh God, I gotta go back and do the whole motif again. Um, the poll is from the original like Clockwork, so it's a very memey sort of thing on the team when I was on there.
Ba-dum,
I
doodle-doo-doo.
stop. I'll leave right now, man. Look, I got
I'll,
PTSD
I'll
from
behave.
it.
I'll behave. I'll behave.
But I don't even know. I don't even. It's not even bad. It's just like you ever like do something over and over, and you kind of begin to hate it a little bit.
Oh yes, absolutely.
That
Yes.
was me because I had to do.
Repetition is the killer.
I
Yeah.
mean, I had to do like Clockwork. Then I had to do the Return of the Truth, which has like Clockwork motifs in it, and then jump into Case 3. There's a lot of like Clockwork motifs throughout. Um, I couldn't escape that song, man. I couldn't escape it at all. It was everywhere. I was crying.
Was it haunting your dreams as
Yeah.
well? Like,
Oh my God, that reminds me. This is not fully related, but in 2-4 when Sonata appears,
yes.
she makes her big courtroom appearance. I was dreaming the night, I think a couple of days before the premiere of that, and I woke up in a cold sweat because in the dream, when she appeared, the chat went, "Oh my God, it's Sugar Stamp," and I woke up in a cold sweat because just like, no.
Oh my goodness.
And then the team gave me shit for it, but I was like, look, I've been on this production for way too long, man. I start dreaming about meme things like that. So, but yeah, like Clockwork, man. It's been like Clockwork. It really is like Clockwork. There's just that song is just like it
You
haunts
forgot
me.
like annoying like clockworking brackets. I guess
It haunts
that's the
me,
official track.
dude. It haunts me. It almost haunts me as much as when we were teasing Sonata Return with we did an audio leak of the Return to Truth theme, which in the beginning has the clock boxes ticking, along with the rising ostinato violins. Someone in the fan server was like, "Why are you guys using water drops in your music?" And I was like, "That's not water. That what? Those are clog boxes. What?" I've been haunted by that song, man. I couldn't escape it. Could not escape it if I tried.
Oh
I don't
my
know how Solo
goodness.
Capella got away with it not being annoying, but then again, I don't think they ever had to compose 5 different versions of it.
I don't know. Maybe you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and like it's just one of those things where it just gets in your head, and then if you're getting to the point where like you're waking up like with nightmares, you can't sweat with nightmares, I think it might be time to reassess.
It's
Oh
pretty,
my
pretty, pretty bad. James can give you some funny stories of me waking up in the middle of the night just going, "Oh my God, I dreamed of EOJ. This is bad."
Clocks. Fuck.
Exactly. Just
Like
like, oh
you're seeing clocks on the walls. You see them appear in your dreams. You
God.
start like, goodness. Metronomes like swinging back and forth, ticking and the tocking. Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna throw up in my mouth.
I could probably I could probably not talk to you all day on that, but that's like, but I'm not going to do that.
There are other things
We'll
you can
move.
torture me about. There are other things.
There are other things to delve into, but as I say, but yeah, like I've been in that situation where like I've woken up in not about clock specifically, but like things that like maybe just haunt you from maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. What particular genre of musical artist has influenced the way that you go about composing music? Is there a particular genre that you find most enjoyable, or something anything particular that you enjoy?
I'll be honest. This is gonna be very controversial, right? I don't actually listen to a whole lot of music.
Ah, okay. I would have thought like because you compose music. I would have thought you'd like listen to music all the time.
I know, right? People would think that, and I'm like, it's not like I actively go and study music. I mean, I have a couple of favorite artists, but I'm like, I'm not a big music guy, which is so weird to admit. But of the ones that I do listen to and the ones I think have influenced me, orchestral speaking, Joe Hisaishi from Studio Ghibli fame. He's you know famous, big guy, big name in the business. He's probably one of my favorites. I love almost all the music he's made for all the Ghibli films that I have seen. He's definitely influenced me just in the sense of like, I would love to compose something as good as that. I don't think I ever will because I'm not Joe Hisaishi, but it'd be pretty cool. And then the second person, uh, which is kind of made an in joke on the team, Toby Fox.
Oh, of Undertale. Oh, that's interesting. Deltarune. Yeah, he does great stuff. Undertale and Deltarune. Yeah, great games.
Undertale, Deltarune, Pokemon. What was the latest one with the dead professor? Is that a spoiler? Sword and Shield? No, Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet.
I couldn't tell you. I haven't picked up a Pokemon game in years. I couldn't tell you.
Right. So he's been influential more in the sense of listening to the OST to Undertale and recognizing how he sort of used motifs to tell a story. Uh, I started doing that
Gaster's
for
theme and the rest
case.
of it. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
started using that sort of technique, um, and honestly in case three. I guess there's some spoilers in there, but also some not spoilers that are more like hints and teasers that I could probably get away with saying here. But you know how in Toriel's theme you hear traces of his theme, and then also you hear traces of Asgore's theme, and it's meant to
Yes,
tie.
yes, themat. I don't know what you call it, but like markers, I suppose. You see themes between. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So, taking that idea of there's one theme, but I'm going to divide it between like 6 or 7 characters. I started doing that for a lot of Case Three's music. Um, I don't know what I can get away with saying. Well, hang on. I need to let me. I'm going through the files in my head to figure out like how many things I've connected together that no one's going to notice because they don't pay attention. So, Equities theme back in Case Two.
Yes, yes.
The one that plays, I think, in 2.5 or 2.6 when she's in the forest. It's a very strong, very aggressive. I'm a very cool gal, and I'm not to be messed around with. There's a motif in there that returns in Case 3 for a character related to Equity who only just recently got revealed.
Okay.
And that's a very intentional thing I did way back when. Even before we started talking about Case 3, I pulled out of Case 2, Equity's theme, realized that, I could redo this and put it elsewhere and, figure out where it goes. And then I had established that, that sort of familial connection between her and this other character who I'm pretty sure I can't say, even though it should be obvious. Go back and watch 3.5, guys. Listen to the music. There's also some stuff I did with Sonata's themes in Case 3 so far, especially her objection theme. There's a little line in 3.1.4, no, 3.4. Oh God, it's been so long. One of the trial episodes.
There'll be a test at the end of this. I'll make sure you get it right.
I was a team leader, and I can't remember my own episodes. Sonata says something in some episode about how she liked to listen to the choir. It's a very throwaway line. Her objection theme has a choir singing. Hey guys, I planned that. Hey guy, that was not a throwaway line, guys. That was me doing that intentionally. There's a very good reason why that appears. It's not a throwaway line. It's the motif. The motif, the language of music becoming the language of writing, and the language of writing becoming the language of music. It's me combining these things together to create this story motif that Toby Fox was doing way back when. And I decided, I'm gonna throw my head in the ring and see how many people don't notice any of those, because they won't. But yeah, that's those two have been my biggest musical influences.
So you were basically, in a weird way, you were approaching the composition as a writer, but not as a composer. You were thinking
Yes.
about the language of the music
Yes.
to connect to the writing, rather than how the if that makes sense. So that's really interesting. So you were approaching it in a different way, and then it worked out thematically. You were thinking, like, how is this going to connect from A
Exactly.
to B from
Oh yeah,
ages ago?
that was definitely on point. I've also said this before. I think of music less as a music and more of a poem, because I'm pulling from my own poetic disciplines, and recognizing that a lot of what applies to the theory of poetry can sort of apply to the theory of music. Um, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of that because that's some really like intellectual, like really highbrow stuff that I'm not sure I can articulate even with my experience. But yeah, I compose with the idea that songs are a form of poetry. If I apply the theories of poetry that I like, I can compose a song. And it just so happens that things tie together and lead from one way into the other. The language of the writing is the language of the song. The language of the song is the language of the writing. It's very unorthodox.
That's interesting. So it's all starting to make sense now, like how.
Oh, is it? It makes sense to somebody.
You have to like maybe watch it a few times maybe to see these little things, but like now you've explained like how you've done that, like why it makes sense. Like, oh, I see how the mechanics were put together. You approached it as you composed it as a writer more so than a composer. That's how I see it. I don't know if everyone's going to agree with me on that, but like that's how I see you've done that.
It's how it worked. I mean, that seems to have led to people liking the songs, and that's always a plus.
They're really, really good songs. I think you're being a bit too harsh on your earlier work, especially. But like, it's you joined EOJ quite a long time ago, didn't you? Was it like 5 years ago or something? Like when you first joined the team. That's when that's quite a long span of time to actually contribute to a single project.
I think 6 years actually. This April, it's been 6 years. Oh God, damn.
Like over half a decade.
Yeah, stop talking, man.
To
Stop it.
to contribute to a single project, and like over that 6 years is a long time for your style of music and writing to develop while you are contributing to the project, and you can see how things changed as a writer and as a composer as well. You look at your previous stuff and think like that's not very good. I can do better stuff now. I wish I could do it again. Without me waffling on, of course. Like, so when did you first get? When did you first get involved with the EOJ project, and how did you get involved with it? I think you've talked about this before, of course, but for people who might not be aware of that, how did you get involved with it specifically?
I've told this story so many times it might even be true at this point. Let me think, because it's been 6 years, like you said, it's a while ago. I think I was a sophomore in college. No, I was just finishing up my freshman year in college, and I was kind of waffling in terms of like pony content consumption. Um, I had watched Turnabout Storm, and I think the help video for Elements just popped up on my feed. I didn't know what it was, but I went to check it out anyway. And that was when it said, here's a sign up form. I need proofreaders and all that. So I said, oh, okay, I'll just put my stuff in. Didn't think about it. Sophomore year comes, and I get an email around like summertime saying, hey, you've been selected for the pre-reading test or proofreading test. And I was like, proofreading test for what? Wait, I don't remember. Oh, it's that one thing that I did like 4 or 5 months ago. Oh crap. Okay, I guess I'll take a look. And I did it, obviously, and I didn't think about it again. And then I got selected onto the team, and I was like, what was this? Oh yeah, it's the one thing I did a couple months ago. I completely forgot. That's how I got, how I joined. But there's a funny story with that didn't come up until way like years later. That is so sad, but also so hilarious. So I'm gonna paint you a picture, right? Originally for the proofreading role, there were like 70 plus applicants. Once the test came out, half of them dropped. Like it was because they didn't want to get involved or they were busy or whatever. So there was like 30, 40 people left. It was graded on a point system, and there are like 3 categories of like grammar mistakes, cleaning up dialogue, and then adding stuff. And the idea was that you would get points for all the things that you did to the script. It was summer. I was busy. I did not put too much focus or effort on it because I was focusing on other stuff, obviously, and I still got in. It turns out I was actually the 6th highest person, but the original director accidentally thought I was the 5th highest person. And that's why they emailed me and brought me on board. We have a missing 6th writer who never knew that they actually had outscored me.
Oh man, I never knew that.
Yeah, it was like 3 years. It was 3 years or 2 or 3 years into what we were doing. We were just looking over one day and we were like, hang on, Jarvy, you got 50 something points. This person got 60 something points. Why aren't they on the team? And we were like, holy shit. No.
Was number 5 the cutoff point then? Was
Yeah,
that like the top?
yeah.
Oh shit! Oh
So
god!
it was just dumb luck that I got
Due
on.
to an admin, was that an admin fuck up?
It
I
really
don't know
was.
what happened there.
It was an admin flub, and like we were crying, we were laughing, we were like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that's the only reason I'm here." He messed up, and I was like, "What the fuck, guys?" So we were like, "Oh my god!" Like, and then that I was around the time like I was starting to do a lot more anyway. So we were like, so Jared went from being like the lowest scoring of the top 6 to team leader of the writers for Case 3. What? Okay.
Oh my.
So, and in the joke, there's like there's like a couple meme statuses where they were like saying like the legendary 6th writer and all that, and then we had to explain to the team like what happened, why,
Oh.
what 6th writer are you talking about? And we were like, so Jared wasn't supposed to be here, but
Oh my goodness! I don't think you've ever mentioned that before. At least in the podcasts I've watched, anyway.
it is a legendary in team, not really secret but joke, and I don't know where this person is. I don't know if they ever checked their emails or even reapplied. I don't think they ever did. But sorry, but also thank you. I think.
EOJ would be drastically different if that. Imagine if that writer took the writing role instead of you did. That's so.
Yeah, they might not have cared about equity as much as I do, but let's be honest, no one else cares about equity the same way that I do. So we'll talk about that later.
Did someone not count the list properly or something? I don't know.
It's a great story. It's just so
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Where's the 5 gone? Where's the 2?
I think it was just a flub. Just you ever just read numbers backwards, like you say 55 instead of or 45 instead of 54? It might have just been a flub like that, honestly. So it's just people think that you have a specific skill set when you get on these kind of stuff. Really, it sometimes it's just dumb luck like that, I guess.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to dispute that, but like,
It's hilarious though. I mean, I think I've earned my spot. Obviously, when I was on the team,
that's a sitcom.
It's hilarious.
Like, due to an admin error.
We did not know for 2 or 3 years. You have been brought on board. Sign away your soul for 5 years. Huh? What? Okay.
So I'm interrupting you again. So you first applied as a proofreader. So for people who don't know what that is, so what is a proofreader exactly? Is you brought on to basically like spell check and grammar, that kind of thing?
That was it. And I it was good because that was the role I specifically requested, because I was like, I'm starting sophomore year of college. This is gonna get really busy. I don't think I'm gonna have a whole lot of time to dedicate to this thing. I'm probably gonna be here for like a year or two. Haha, joke's on me. But yeah, it was like, line editing, just cleaning up the dialogue, making sure things are spelled right, making sure things are, clean, okay. And that's where it began with, Case 1, Episode 2. I just was a basic copy editor. I was happy in that role. And then 3 years later, I was making big changes on the writing team. So funny how things go.
So at which point did you start to take on more responsibilities? Was it around Case 2 where you started to contribute a lot more to the project? Because from what I understand is you had to you basically put yourself forward a lot more, saying like I can probably contribute more to the project and like actually start having a more solid role.
Yeah, it was Case 2, Episode 1. There were some toss-ups in the writing team where, we started needing to contribute a lot more to fix some administrative issues, I want to say, with the writing team head at the time. And we were, the opportunity presented itself for me to be like, I think I can do a little bit more here. I won't do just script reading or script proofing. I'll contribute to actual adding lines and changing things up. And that's when I got started doing a lot more, and more or less kind of went from there. So I started doing a little less proofing, although obviously proofing was part of it, and more drafting, to the point where, I was actually contributing a lot more than I had in the previous case.
So you were starting to take on more responsibility while you were still at college, is that right? You were still
Yep.
like basically doing like these huge essays and dissertations and things.
Yep.
So you took on a lot of stuff at once.
Yeah. I don't know how I did it, but I did it somehow.
Crikey. Is that where like you started having like sleepless nights and things like that? Because
Yes, that began in Case 2.
Both ends, but you were burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, it began. I mean, that's part of it. You start spending a lot of time on something, you start dreaming about it. But yeah, I definitely started contributing a lot more to Case 2, and obviously it led to some funny dreams, some not so funny dreams, a lot of stress, things that sucked, obviously, and things that, needed to be worked on our ends. But it did mean, I think that's just a natural progression of when you start getting more involved with something, you're gonna get invested. Remember when I had joined with the assumption that I'm gonna be here for a year at most. That was a lie, obviously. 'Cause I didn't think I could get invested, and then I ended up getting invested, and I was like, I want to do more because there are things in here that I did that I like, and I want to see them to fruition. I gotta stay, and I gotta do more if I want that to happen.
I think that the biggest one that people want to know more about is, of course, like fans of EOJ and stuff like that. Is probably some of the stuff that happened with Case 2 and Case 3. Like, some people really like Case 2, some people really like Case 3, but Case 2 is definitely. There's a lot to say about that one in terms of, like, well, quite a lot. I think a lot of people on the project had difficulties with that in many different aspects, and I think that's you included. You're not really much of a fan of Case 2. What I'm gathering.
I'm a better fan of the second half of Case 2 than I am a fan of the first half, which means that I only come out of it with like a kind of embittered sense of the case. I recognize why people like it. I also recognize why I don't like it, and I have a very unique perspective, I think, just because of how my involvement shaped my feeling for it.
Right. I think, and part of the problem, I think that the team was going through a lot of, like, going through a transitional period, like a lot of quite a lot of turnover and people changing roles, and like quite a lot of, like, those kind of issues were maybe putting a lot of pressure on a lot of aspects of the team.
Oh yeah.
And from what I'm gathering, from what for the podcasts I've watched, and like the things I've listened to, Case 2 kind of had quite a troubled production. How long it took to, how long it is, how big it is, and how long it took to get the whole thing out, which is it's really impressive. It managed to get past the gate at all, based on how, from what I've heard, based on like what was going on in the background and stuff. But Case 2, I don't know. There's a lot to like about Case 2, but there's issues with it. I think that's fair to say.
I can tell you what I liked at least. It got better in the second half once it actually started trying to humanize the characters. When it started peeling back, obviously, the obscurity of the mystery, which is a necessary component, but it sort of recognized that this is so complicated, it's not worth making more complicated. We've got to realign ourselves with the heart of the story, which is the characters, the ponies in question. I liked Fair Devotion the most in Case 2. I like Sugar Stamp too, but I think Sugar Stamp is just cute. She's great. But Fair Devotion as the character was the crux around which favoring Case 2 makes sense for me. She is complicated, but she's very understandable. She's not a good pony. She did try to do bad things for a good reason. She was probably like my favorite part of Case 2. Um, what else did I like? It's been so long. I've been ripping on it for so long. I can't remember if I like anything else. I mean, the denouement, I think, of 2.8 and 2.9, just in terms of like the emotions, very good stuff. I think the stuff that James and I did at the very end with the stuff between Turning Page and Fair Devotion, the flashing back, flashing forward, the speech that Fair Devotion gave turning at the end, that showed heart. That showed a lot of what we end up trying to do in Case 3. That's just a sense of character, heart, soul, authenticity. None of this, complicated mystery, whodunit nonsense that ironically is important, but in my view just isn't as important as the mystery of who these characters are. Um, that struck me as like the best part of Case 2 because whether it is just inherent bias because I did write that part, um, it felt very true. It didn't feel very haha, I got the audience kind of vibe. It felt very much like this is a tragedy. We can't ignore that fact. This sucks for everyone. That's the point. Um, That's what I liked about case two. What I didn't like about case
Oh
two,
God!
we're beginning
Okay, yeah,
alphabetical,
yeah.
chronological.
Get it off, get it
'Cause
off, get it off, get out your system.
I think both James and G have obviously spoken at length. I'll give my kind of short answer. I did not like the mystery. I found there's a lot of problems that I have with the mystery. One, it was needlessly complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
It was needlessly complicated to the point where you had two, um, fake outs basically midway through the case. And while that can work fine for a case two, what the hell? It's like this is just case two, guys. We don't have to go balls, sorry. We have to go all in that way. But we did, and that was very complicated to the point where, in two, three, I think we had a whole issue where the opening testimony from Private Eye you could fall asleep to because there's nothing happening. It's just explaining stuff that we hadn't established in 2-1 and 2-2, and you can ignore that entire first half of the episode because it doesn't matter, which is really bad. That makes the episode feel very weak if nothing in most of it lacks any consequence because it's just there for exposition or even just detail. And don't get me wrong, exposition is super important, but it was done very sloppily there. The other thing I didn't like about Case 2 was the fact that most of the writers didn't know what the hell the plot was.
That's not good.
No.
Right.
No. And, this is right as, I started doing a lot more. I didn't know who the killer was until, like, halfway through writing the episodes, which is not good. I think James would definitely agree with me here, where I say, like, that was very bad. That was pretty awful of a predicament for us to be in. We're just like, we've been writing it one way, but we didn't know we were supposed to write it the other, way with this in mind and this other twist in mind. We literally did not know what the heck the mystery was going to be resolved or how it was going to be resolved. And there are a bunch of issues with that. There are a bunch of reasons for that, but that definitely soured my sense of how the case was going to be.
Right.
Obviously, we managed to, I think, salvage it, but people underestimate and don't understand or really recognize like how much work it required to do that, how much we had to throw out, how much we had to like fight for, how much we had to be willing to, stand our ground and say we want to keep this kind of writing in and toss out the artificial complexity stuff next, in favor of we want to tell the story. We don't want to tell a guidebook sort of thing. And when a writer says they hate the writing in that way, that should say something about like the product itself. I think we fixed it. I don't think we necessarily made it great. And I think when people say they think it's great, what they're talking about is the great stuff we put at the end, not like the other great stuff that could have been part of it. The only reason the great stuff happened at the end is because James and I really fought to get it to that point.
So when you say you both fought to get that, so you having disagreements with other members of the team to keep those elements in terms of the story, you had to like fight to say I want to keep that, but I don't want. We need to get rid of this. You really had to like fight tooth and nail just to get to the point it was.
In a way, yeah. It was definitely very tough. Thank God, James was here, and he completely agreed with me on a lot of the points we were making. Again, the plot was so complicated that it was hard for even us writers to keep up with all the twists. We realized that we need to not only simplify, but we need to not do that. Like, this mystery should not be about how the fuck was Royal Warrior killed. It should be who killed him and why. If we have all these complicated puzzle pieces of like arrangements and characters going with, in the forest and timing and all that ultimately don't matter because they don't matter, then you've just made a fake complicated plot for the sake of having a fake complicated plot. Like, in 2-2, when they go into the forest, or maybe 2-1, where Phoenix is writing out all the timestamps of when people went in and when people went out and, all that stuff. That does not get used at all. It legitimately is just a detail that we avoid because we recognize at that point this is useless information that doesn't help anybody. It ultimately doesn't even help even in the final parts of the episode because we don't even return to that stuff. We don't need to at that point. It was just thrown in there. And that was something that I had problems with. That like, oh, this is important now, but it's not important later. And it made for a very rough, writing process. God, it's been 4 years and I'm still heated about that.
if I were to throw my 2 cents in there, I suppose it's case two is I'm torn on it. I really enjoyed it when I first watched it the first time around. When I came back from last year GalaCon, I came back from GalaCon and because I only found out about EOJ at that convention. So I watched Turnabout Storm again. I binged a lot of the episodes. I watched all that, then started watching EOJ, and then I watched Case 2. I enjoyed it the first time around, but I can totally see starting to watch it again. There is issues with it, and I can see, based on everything that you've said and what other people on the EOJ team have said to me specifically, I can see some of the turmoil that was happening behind everything all come out in the writing, come out of how it all comes together, and there is definitely a case to say it's probably a bit too long as well. It's trying to do too many things at once. I think that's probably one of the big issues I have with it. It's trying to do too many. It's too much stuff at once when it can't really carry itself properly. It's getting a bit confused and a bit complicated, and like it's maybe it lost its way a little bit in the earlier episodes, perhaps.
I'll give credit to the sense like that was the first time we tried to do something like that. It's gonna be rough because your first time trying anything ambitious is going to be rough. Like there's hardly a case I think where you could hit the nail on the head the first time 100%.
Of course, yeah.
I want to be graceful and have that kind of context and recognize that that was our first time, writing a whole case. Because case one was technically already written, we were just putting it together. But even then, as much as that is true, the amount of work that us writers had to put in to, in a way, reinvigorate faith in that case alone because of the writing being such an issue tells me that that almost wasn't worth it. And case 2 makes for a spectacular first impression. It is not watchable again. It is not. There is very little I find worth rewatching in it. Maybe bits and pieces here and there, but they're far and few in between. I don't think there's much you can get out of it because it's too big for its own britches.
Yes.
And I get why it was. I just wish we could have done a better job, and I wish that the writer head at the time had been more open, and we weren't all writing in the dark, and things like that. It's a disappointment in that sense. It makes for good spectacle if you want to turn off your brain and like just be immersed in like oh whoa, and that's fine.
Yes, that's a fair assessment. That is, yeah, it's definitely the spectacle of the case itself of the characters. Like
the spectacle is great, but there's very little substance when you get past the spectacle, and that's something that I have gripes with case 2. Like, yes, it's shocking, but what else is there?
But shocking, but like it's kind of shallow.
It is, yeah. It's a shallow kind of shocking. It feels very much shock value. I would argue that case 3, even though it's still starting off, it's trying, and I hope, at least on my end, what I was trying to do as team leader for it, that there's a good balance between the spectacle, which is necessary because it's a murder mystery thriller, while also hitting all these very deep themes and ideas, and make sure that it's all feeling very connected and very much like not tacked in at the end like we had to do with case 2. 3-1 should fix all the problems I have with case 2 by virtue of what it sets out to accomplish. It has to set up all the themes, set up the spectacle, which is the murder, or I guess attempted murder, the mystery itself. Set up all the questions that we want to have, but then also have that sort of substance, that simple strength of a story telling you, trust me, there will be more. Trust me, there will be more to this. Case 2 doesn't quite have that, I don't think. Now, of course, that could be me, being very biased because I did design case 3's story, along with the 2 other people. But I want to say, like, I want to hope that even unconsciously that should be obvious. I think there's a lot of rewatch value already in case 3. I think there's a lot that you can take out of case 3, not in terms of like taking out material, but like things you can take from it, some impressions, some feelings, some emotion, some thought, some idea, something that elevates it to the point where it's both fun and yet also, and I hate to kind of use this term, literary.
Right.
I mean, I know that's a loaded term. I'm not even a big fan of it these days, but Case 3 has to be more than Case 2. And I think it is. I think people who don't think that, the case isn't complete yet. You can't give it a fair assessment. But it is complete from my end because the scripts are done. So, like, yeah, it's complete on my end. I want to believe and want to argue that this is a story that elevates beyond its own confines. Case 2 is stuck in its own confines.
But yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to do a post mortem on, which for me to do, I'm going to have to watch it all again, which is difficult. Might be difficult because I binged it originally, which is not a good. Don't binge it for God's
No,
sake, folks.
that's so
Don't binge it. What
long.
I did, kind of binged across 2 days. You just can't do it. Like I watched maybe 5 or 6 episodes on the bounce, and then like watched the other 4 the following day. That's the weekend I came back from Galacon. I pretty much binged EOJ. I was like, oh, I enjoyed it, but like it was exhausted after all of
Oh
it.
yeah. Yep.
Watching it non-stop, but like I was ill in bed, so like what else am I going to do? I'll just binge this. But that's not a good idea. Don't do that. But yeah, it is like compared case 3 compared to case 2 is I'm getting vibes. It's a lot more confident. It's more efficient with what it's trying to do. It's more quick on its feet. That's just that, and like it seems to be more focused and more directed, which is really good. From what I've seen so far, and like the pace is a lot more consistent. It's not like dragging its feet in places and things like that. But yeah, there's a lot to say, and like there's those 2 different cases, but like there's a stark contrast between 2 of them, and it is interesting to hear your input, what you've given me on that, which I do appreciate on that, and I think a lot of listeners out there will be interested in the input as well. So it's because you were one of the like biggest contributors of the project, and like to not have your input on that is like feels a bit incomplete, I suppose. But yes, it is one to consider anyway, at least. But
We
I
just
don't
have to
want to dwell on it
see.
too long.
Yeah, we'll just have to see how it holds up, honestly, if and when EOJ is complete. How will people feel about case 2, case 3, case 4, and case 5? I don't know. I can't predict that far. But at least for my money, I look favorably upon case 3, and I look with slight disfavor towards case 2, and it's just gonna be that way. But I think that's just normal.
That's just how it is, isn't it? I suppose. Like, not everyone like it's just that's how the project was. That's how everything came together, despite everything. So you can look at it that way. You can look at it with bitterness, I suppose, but you can also say, despite everything, you and the rest of the team managed to get case 2 over the line. You actually finished it. For better or worse, it is what it is. It's at least it's finished, and people can watch it and discuss it and like have conversations about it. But it's just interesting to see where we're going to go from there. Um, there was a little anecdote I wanted to pull you upon. Like, what was the deal with the 40 pages of Zecora lines? You mentioned that in passing in a podcast. Like, so
Oh
there,
no.
was that another like hellhole?
Yeah. How do I explain this? So Zecora testifies in 2-3, and the way that the testament was originally written was we wrote it all. It was written without rhyme. So it was my job and Edith's job, who's another writer before he became an alumni, and Pretty Pegasus Wing's job to turn it into rhyme. And that was tough because that's testimony that you got to turn into rhyme somehow. Did that, and we had a whole process where like every week we have to do a draft. So I got my contributions done out of the way, and I went to bed. I wake up and I find out that one of the writers, the previous team lead, was saying that oh yeah, there's this entire plot point that's missing. We need to add more testimony from Zecora in order to talk about it. One, we didn't know about this plot point because it wasn't even told to us, the writers. So that's already a problem. Two, he added 40 pages worth of Zecora testimony that we now have to re-rhyme and make fit with the other testimony. And then make the scene, continue to the end.
So you were boxed in from the start. Oh my
I
god.
was not happy with that. I went to James and I was like, holy shit, dude, I think I'm tempted to drop the project at this point if that's just how it's gonna be. He helped retain me, keep me on board, was very supportive. I took a day off from EOJ to just do school stuff. Came back, wrote out a whole message about how this is not okay, and then I went out to work with Anderson Pretty Pegasus Wings to get her done. And so we ended up with Zecora testimony that is probably the best written Zecora rhyming you'll ever get on this side of the internet, bar none. It's also filled with spite and agony, and that was just 2-3. That was bad. That was man, people think rhyming is easy, but when you want to rhyme correctly and write it in a way that is
And for that length of time as well, don't forget. Like,
and somehow you have to work in all these terms and legalese.
and you have to work in the symbolism that it has to thematically work.
It has to sound like Zecora. It has to sound like actually good dialogue somehow while being a rhyme and a limerick. It's like I'm going to shoot myself in the head. I'm gonna down a gallon of ethanol and see what happens. It was a nightmare. 40 pages of testimony that one we didn't know was gonna happen, and two all involves Zecora. That was a bad time, man. It was a very dark time, and that was just 2-3. So pulling back the curtains there, yeah, Zecora was rough. I'm never wanting to write a zebra like that ever again.
It reminded me of that. Oh, you're probably too young for this. It reminded me of that character like Gruntilda from Banjo-Kazooie, that platformer game. Like her whole shtick is all her dialogue is in rhyme, like, and she does it specifically just to annoy everybody else. And I can imagine like thinking of all the rhymes just for that character and across a whole game, and then make it like everything makes sense and make it fit the theme and all that. It's not easy. Any old hack can like put together like a 5-line limerick like with and job's done. But doing that, you're writing like pages of dialogue, make it all rhyme, make it all fit, make it fit the pre-existing dialogue that's already there already, and then try and see if it works. I can see why that was really difficult. That's not lost on me anyway.
It was
My goodness,
very bad, man.
So every time Zecora speaks, you're getting like flashbacks, basically.
Yeah, and I was so annoyed after the episode came out because we had people in the comments going like, "Oh, this line from her doesn't technically rhyme because the word at the end of the top line doesn't match the word at the end of the second line." And I'm like, "Have you guys never heard of slant rhyme? Have you guys never heard of enjambment? I've had to pull out my like textbook of poetry in order to get these rhymes right, in order to figure out like how can I do this correctly and not make it awkward. And now you're trying to tell me that this is wrong, even though it's not? I was so done with it. I was so glad that we never had her come back. Oh no, that's not true. She did come back. Kill me. Yeah, 2-3 was bad. 2-4 was kind of rough too. I don't know. Like, have you ever heard the story from 2-4 where I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because I had a dream something went wrong with the writing, and it turned out I was right?
You may have mentioned that, but like, say it again anyway.
Oh, so this is coming off of the tragedy that was 2-3, right? So 2-4 comes around. We were doing a draft of it. I went to sleep. I woke up at like 12 a.m. because I just had this really bad burst of anxiety, and I was like, something's wrong with EOJ. Something's wrong with EOJ. I checked my phone. There's something wrong with EOJ. The previous team lead had said of the opening scene, the 2-4, yeah, we have to cut this, rearrange it, and completely rewrite it because I don't like it. And it's too long, and there's nothing happening. And I was like, shut up, man. This is too early for this shit. It's 12 a.m. I got a test that I gotta do later today. Are you kidding me right now? And it was just like, I can't even remember the exact reason why he gave it, but it felt like he was completely crapping on the work James and I had done to fix scene 1 and make it not bad. I don't know if you remember scene 1 from 2-4, but it was this nice kind of cutesy moment between Scootaloo and Turning, right? Where Scootaloo's telling like what actually happened in the forest, and it's this cute bonding moment between the two of them. Before they meet Diamond Tiara, and then when they meet Diamond Tiara, the whole running away and all that. That was our first attempt like dramatizing exposition instead of just giving exposition. And the former team lead said, "No, we got to redo it." And we were like, "You gave us 40 pages of Zecora last script. You think we're gonna listen to you after that nonsense? No, 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 no." I threatened the walk. I prepped them to be like, this is not how I'm gonna be treated on this, honestly. Um, you need to let this be like you need to let this slide because we cannot trust that your sense of this is correct given the errors of your previous script. Please, don't. How dare you dismiss the work that we've done so handily? Um, and yeah, I woke up in a cold sweat because of that because I just knew something bad had happened, and it turned out something bad almost did happen. And James can totally back me up here. He was there when it happened. He was awake, I think, when it happened, and he was just as shocked as I was that that came out. Um, yeah, 2, 3, and 2, 4 were pretty bad.
All of that stuff plays into all the stuff behind the scenes plays out, like how Case 2 came to be, like all that stuff that's happening in the background, and like all the it's rough. It's rough. Like when stuff like that happens, and like you feel like kind of like I suppose powerless to stop it. I suppose or powerless to. It does feel like that sometimes. I suppose like when I've had enough of this, I'm just gonna put down tools and just walk away. Like there's plenty of situations that has happened to me, not just in a writing situation, but just in general. But like it is interesting. It's I can see it sounded like a very rough time for you and James and the writing staff, and a lot of people are having to like deal with that, and like it's not good waking up in the cold sweat, like, fucking hell, that kind of thing. It's not good, but not good, is it? But I appreciate you sharing that with me and the rest of us like listening back. So like all this stuff is interesting for how like the project developed over time and stuff, especially with Case 2 and 3 and so on. Um, so despite all the challenges of like EOJ, like what would you say is your most favourite aspect of working on the project? Do you have any particular highlights you want to talk about? Was it from a writing perspective, or would you say it's as a composer? Would you say?
I kind of give you two answers to both questions. As a composer, I think the highlight so far has been in 2.9 when the Rosalba Athena Psych starts playing. Someone in the live stream chat was going, "Holy shit, this is so like Undertale, like this is so Toby Fox." And I was like, "Wow, thank you. That is quite the compliment to get that. The song playing and the way it plays and the scene it plays in gave you the same vibes as fighting the final boss in Undertale. Um, so that was a pretty good highlight. Um, Writing wise, this is so predictable of me. 326, case 3, episode 2, scene 6. My baby. One scene that I knew was going to happen. I've joked about this. The team hates me that how much I joke about this, but they also love it. I have this theory that writers chase certain scenes and they need to write toward certain scenes or certain stories. And they can spend a lifetime working to get to that point, to get to the thing that they need to write. For me, that was 326. The whole scene with Equity and Philo in Equity's office. It's a very short scene, obviously, but very subdued and very. You can feel the intensity. I think the sense of unease, the sense of confusion that we were meant to give to people in it. That was the scene that existed in my head since we started planning out Case 3 and then the whole rest of EOJ. I just knew like that has to appear. That is the crux around which I want people to change their minds about Equity. Because originally we had a lot of people who are like, Equity sucks, like Equity's the fucking worst. She's just cold hearted. It's like, Jesus Christ, you only saw her for like 2 scenes. You hate her already? Wow, okay, hang on.
People are really protective over their main characters, though. I think you got to like factor that in as well. I
For
suppose.
sure, yeah, they don't like having some character, diss on the Princess of Friendship at all. But my thinking was here's my crackpot theory that isn't really a crackpot theory that I've joked about with G. Who's the main character of EOJ?
Who's the main character of EOJ?
Who's the main character?
The main character. Ah.
People might say, it's the Write Anything agency. People might say it's Sonata. No, no, no. Main character is Equity. Why? Well, I can't tell you because spoilers. But
Okay.
but my thinking when we were designing the story of EOJ, and when I started getting involved, when I started recognizing opportunities for character growth and recognizing what is the crux around which the story will orbit? What is the main body? It's equity. Equity is the main character of EOJ. If EOJ had gone down, like the literal story of EOJ had gone differently, not the production, but like the actual narrative, if things had gone in a slightly different direction, Equity would have been the protagonist. She's not, but she's still a very strong factor. And 326 was my starting point for where I wanted to show that. Yes, Sonata and the defense agent or defense attorney to prosecution, they are the conduits through which the narrative of this particular kind of story is told. But this is the story of Equity. This is the story of why that scene in 326 is so interesting and so different. Why was Equity so cold? And then why was he so sad in that scene? Um, it's a scene that existed just in my head. I knew it from the moment I had stumbled upon this idea that Equity really actually is the main character. I knew that scene almost by heart. Even before we started writing anything for Case 3, it was a very surreal experience to know all the words I needed to put into that scene. All the things I needed to put into it, all of it. Writers chase that kind of high. They chase that sort of, I know everything about this piece that I'm writing. I don't have any questions. There's going to be no blockage. There's going to be no issues. I just know it. And for me, that's been like the most gratifying, part of Case 3, but probably, of my time on EOJ. Just that confidence, that sense of, yeah, this is the scene. This is what I've been writing towards the whole time. Obviously, there's some other scenes to come, but this is what I needed.
And that's the aspect that stands out the most for you. That particular scene, it perfectly encapsulated of everything that you wanted to do.
Yes, it encapsulates everything about my philosophy going into writing the story of Case 3, developing the story of EOJ, my belief in how you write a story, how you write a mystery, what's more important, what sort of behavior I thought that we should take going forward. Um, there's this line from this is gonna either date me or make you laugh, from Star Trek: The Next Generation, when Picard goes back in time and meets Mark Twain, and he's getting back ready to go back to his ship and his timeline, and Mark Twain gives him a book and says, "If there's anything you want to know about me, it's in these books. If there's anything people want to know about me and my writing and what I believe and what I don't believe and what fascinates me and all the questions that you would ask, a writer, you can look at 326 and probably get a couple answers." I'm not saying like it's the best writing in
that's
the
your
world.
Mark Twain. That's your Star Trek Mark Twain moment. 326. That's all
Yeah,
you.
I'm not saying. Yeah, I'm not saying like it's perfect. It's not the best scene in the world, but it is the one that is probably the most compelling to me. It's the most vulnerable. It's the
And
one that
resonates with you the most.
it is the most drastically different kind of scene that we've had, I think, um, in a lot of these episodes, because it flips so much about Equity and her relationship with others, hints at a greater mystery, um, brings in all these themes and ideas. It's my baby. I don't know how to explain it. It's
Yeah, I exactly am aware of it. Like it's your pride and joy.
exactly.
That's all you need to say. Oh, we didn't really talk about didn't talk about the side project, Bonds of Justice, BOJ as it's known. How did you feel working on that? Did you also enjoy working on that?
It was nice to write and compose and work on something that was traditionally not like an Ace Attorney format. It felt very much more like a short story, short script format, so it was a lot easier to get away with being more creative and less constrained by mechanics. But that's, I enjoyed working on it. I was there for season one, obviously, um, working as I guess, a semi-director, helping the original BOJ PR team with, how to write, how to, you know, do all that stuff. Um, I think it was great when G said, "Hey, we've got this fifth episode that's going to be an epilogue to Case 2. You want to write it?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that could be fun." And so we ended up writing, the fifth episode. I composed Scootaloo's Heart, which I mentioned before is one of my favorite themes to have composed for it. And I went and wrote it myself. It was my first time writing on my own basically for the production. And obviously, the PR team came in and helped edit and all of that, but uh, the vision of that episode was majority, me and G working together on it, but I was the one who, brought it to life with just the, Scootaloo's confession, turning pages rejection, but also acceptance, a little bit of fair devotion, um, and kind of ending on a bittersweet but also pretty sweet sort of ending to all of Case Two, one that I felt like should be separate enough from the tragedy of the Case Two production to the point where we can say like this is a cute, nice ending to it all. So yeah, I it was great to work on something that was not Ace Attorney. Basically, it was great to write something that was just like here's some cute fan fiction. Um, People liked it. People cried apparently, and I was like, oh,
It
sorry.
is. It's a really nice and charming little side stories. Especially the one with like where Sweetie Belle apologizes to Athena because like Sweetie Belle gives Athena a really hard time in the story, and like she apologizes basically like what happened, and because she was like concealing a lot of stuff and things like that. But yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much because I want people to actually watch it. But yeah, it's a really nice little side project. And hopefully we'll get to see more of it in the future at some point, depending on where things fall and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really nice. I'd definitely say like it fills in a few of the blanks, especially with like the main story that you might have missed. So there's a few plot points that people might want to like watch them just to get a bit more context on things. Of course, there's always something I forget before I before I close off. Last thing, what are you currently working on at the moment? So I can actually plug any particular projects you're working on now at the moment.
Yeah, actually. So aside from just, some private music stuff that I'm, just getting together, obviously you can look my name up on YouTube and probably find my channel. I'm using it to archive the songs that I've released for EOJ, for Case 3. I'm very slow in that regard, but I am getting to it. Uh, there are a lot of tracks already. It's going to be a slow go, but I'm going to be uploading them gradually as we come, as the days come. But I guess I can put this here. I've started planning my own audio drama.
Ooh.
Yes. It's not very far. Obviously, I don't like to talk too much about it because I'm a superstitious kind of guy where I'm like, unless I know this is going to be a complete story, I don't want to risk it not being complete.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this, it's not a crossover, but it is, an MLP audio drama. It's a mystery, go figure. And I don't know how long it's going to be, but it'll be my first attempt at making my own sort of thing and taking the lessons that I've learned from, leading the team in EOJ, trying to apply it to here, and trying to create a compelling narrative, um, one that I think could be good. I don't know if and when it'll be complete. This stuff always takes time, but I'm pretty excited about just going through the motions again of creating my own work. It's pretty cool.
Especially after that length of time as well, like after 6 years, you finally got some time on your hands to actually work on your own bits and pieces, which is cool. I For people like where can people check out your stuff? You say you got a YouTube channel. I'll put a link to this in the description so people can actually go straight to it and check out Jarvy's work. You say you got your own YouTube channel. You're uploading some bits and pieces. Would you be able to? People can check out your stuff on there.
Yeah, it's mostly just since I got so many tracks from EOJ from Case 3 alone, I figured that hey, I can use this as an archive, so it's not taking up file space. Um, I've got a couple already from 3.1. There's I think a couple more tracks from 3.1 that I have to upload. Then I got some tracks for 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5 because those are the released episodes so far. And I'm also working on making and then creating videos for original music when I have the time and energy for it. But I have to teach myself how to video edit, which is a fun challenge too. Yay!
That's good stuff. Good stuff. So I'll put the link to his YouTube channel in the description so people can check it out and stuff like that. So please do check out the soundtracks and all the music gubbins is going to be uploading, and of course we'll be looking out for that project. You're going, as I say, we don't know when you don't know when it's going to be. It's still at very early stages yet, but you just, as I say, it's something that you're working on in the background.
You can also follow me on Blue Sky. Obviously, Citizen here has, but if you want, I don't post a whole lot. I'm not a big social media guy, but if I have stuff coming out, it'll be posted on YouTube, but also announcements on my social media. Um, yeah, follow me on FimFiction too if you want to read my non-scripts, because I do have some prose works there that have been reasonably well received over time. I'm not super busy because I've been busy with. I've not been super productive there because I've been super busy elsewhere. But yeah.
One more thing, if you wanted to discuss it, you don't have to. Did you wish to discuss why you left the project, or is that something that you wish to keep to yourself?
I mean, the main reason really was it was time. Like this April, really, I think a couple of days already would have marked my 6th-year anniversary, but I was already there for 5 years. I was there longer than I was in college. Um, and I think, just given the hurdles that I had to face, it was time to go. It was time to step back. It was time to, focus on me. But the thing about that was I didn't want to leave until I was certain that I was done. Um, and that could only come about in 2 ways. One, I wanted to make sure that the music for Case 3 was done. And it was, as I said before. All the music is complete, mastered, ready to be used. It's all there. All the custom music, anyway. Um, but the other thing, too, was I wanted to ensure that the story of Case 3 was completely done. As in all of the scripts. Um, there are more. I mean, there are more scripts there than there were in Case 2. I guess is the most I will say, which is kind of a spoiler, but also, guys, we're being ambitious. I didn't want to leave until I was certain that all of this was done. Because I had started Case 3 and the team on this idea that this is the case to turn things around for us. Um, and I feel pretty confident in that. In fact, I was talking to my friend Pretty Pegasus Wings, and she was saying how when she was reading some of the scripts, um, there's a script that obviously hasn't been released yet, but she said she really liked a part of it that we writers had worked pretty hard on, and I think the team benefits from having the fact that the story is done, at least for Case 3, that there are no surprises left to spring on people there, that we managed to write it in less time than it did take to write Case 2, and that we're happy with it. I'm happy with it. Um, you don't want to stay on something so long that you start to hate it.
Yeah.
You don't want to stay on something so long that you get burned out. There is grace in knowing when to step away, when you have said all that you've needed to say and you realize that it's time to move on. And I guess for me, that's the lesson that I wanted to take. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was done. And it was time to move on. And I think that's a good thing.
And it's nice to hear that you left on your own terms rather than like on all. But after having maybe some bridges were burned and stuff, it's nice to say that you've contributed as much as you've contributed your best work in your view, and you've decided to that I think that's your mark on the series. It's time to like move on to other projects, and that's nice to see. Because that's not always the case, unfortunately, with these kind of projects. Sometimes things happen, acrimonious things happen, and like things fall apart, and that's what happens sometimes. Do you have any idea? Well, you probably don't know, but do you have any idea when episode 36 is out? Is it finished or what? Or can you tell us any more about that, or is that still under wraps? Or
The episode will begin, and then it will end.
that's all you got. Not when it's going to come out. Not nothing at all.
The episode will begin, and it will end. But no, in all seriousness, I can't speak to that. It'll come out when it comes out. In the meantime, go ahead and watch Case 3. There's not too many episodes. I think there's a lot of rewatchability. Go watch 326 and see if you can pick up why I put down some stuff about it. In fact, go watch 3.5 because the stuff I said about Equities theme and the motif there shows up again in 3.5. In fact, after you do that, go back and watch 3.3, scene 3. I think it's scene 3 because there's a thing in 3.5 and in 3.26 that connects to something that plays in scene 3 of 3.3. I'm just shamelessly plugging all the stuff that I've done and showing how, like, yeah, I actually was thinking way ahead with the story and the writing and the music. Um, Please notice, please.
That's everyone's like homework. Like all the things that Jarvy's said and the things he's talked about.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
It's all there. But anyway, as I say, I don't want to keep you any longer than I need to. Thank you so much, Jarvy, for talking to me and coming onto the podcast. I'll be thrilled to have you on at once and on again at some point in the future, if you like. We'll see what happens. I would like to ideally maybe talk to a few more people on the EOJ project before I maybe work on my own EOJ video for the first time, but we'll have to see. I haven't got anybody planned and anybody in the pipeline as of yet. We'll just have to see, folks, see how things pan out. But thank you so much for Jarvy for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, other than the delving into the darkest depths of your mind in certain aspects of things.
Well, hopefully I'm never going to get haunted by clog boxes for the foreseeable future. Or Zecora lines.
I've inflicted pain on you once again.
It's fine. I mean, whatever. It's done.
It's done. It's over. Forget it. It's done. That's the end of the show, folks. Thank you for listening. Take care.